In today's video, I'm gonna talk about different camera frame rates and when to shoot at these different frame rates. When you're watching videos, you are actually not watching something that is moving. Instead, you are looking at series of still images that are playing fast to make it look like it's something that is moving. The simplest example is when you shuffle cards like a magician, your eyes will think they are moving. The cards moving fast tricks your eyes to seem like the cards are actually moving. Yoga everybody, I'm Ray Moses and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing and click on the notification bell to stay updated whenever I upload a new video. There are different frame rates the camera uses when recording a footage. This includes 24 frames, 30 frames, 60 frames, 120 frames, and the list goes on, etc. So, when do you shoot 24 frames per second, which is basically 23.976 frames per second, or 60 frames per second, which is 59.94 frames per second? Basically, the decimal points is how the camera reads when you select 24 frames or 60 frames per second in your camera. The camera will automatically read 24 frames as 23.976 frames per second and 60 frames as 59.94 frames per second. So, when shooting with high-end cameras like Red Dragon's, ARRI, it gives you an option to either shoot at 23.98 frames per second or through 24 frames per second. It will be up to you to decide what to use. Most of the times I shoot everything on 60 frames per second, and then on post-production I slow the clips down. And what I cannot slow down, I drop it on the 24 frames timeline. And yeah, the footage looks good, perfect and awesome to me. But what I didn't know was that when you take the 60 frame per second clip and drop it down on a 24 frame per second timeline, you do not get a true 24 frames per second results, which is accompanied by a cinematic look of motion blur that the eyes easily picks up when you are watching. So when you shoot at 60 frames per second and put it on a 24 frames per second timeline, that clip will not be a true 24 frames per second clip because it will not have the same shutter speed a true 24 frames per second clip is gonna have. Because the 60 frame per second clip will have a shutter speed of 125, which makes it more sharper and hence not getting a true cinematic look of motion blur which you would have gotten if your shutter speed is at 50 and your frame rate is at 24. So for me, unless I'm gonna slow down a clip and I know I wanna slow it down like a B-roll or supplementary footage, I don't film at 60 frames. Instead, I film at 24 frames to get that cinematic look and a beautiful overall look of the film. So you always have to double your shutter speed when shooting. For example, at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 48 or 50. This will give you the most cinematic look with motion blur, which the human eye can easily pick up on. And at 60 frames per second, your shutter speed should be at 120 or 125, depending still on the camera that you're using. And also you can set your shutter angle at 180 degrees so that the camera sets the shutter speed automatically for you. This one is found on high-end cameras like Sony, ARRI, Red Dragon, and also on this camera that I'm using, the GH5. If you're shooting a narrative or an interview, it's good to shoot at 24 frames per second to enable easy audio syncing from an external recorder like a Zoom recorder while using timecode. Right now I'm shooting this YouTube video at 24 frames per second on a GH5 and I'm using an H4n Zoom recorder. So when editing this video, the audio and the video will correctly sync together because I shot it at 24 frames per second, making my workflow so easy and very reliable. Meanwhile, when you film your interview at 60 frames per second, the audio will not match up with the person speaking because of a split second, making the human eyes and ears to easily recognize this. This will make your work look pretty amateur since the viewer will quickly pick up on it. Viewers can tolerate low quality visuals but cannot tolerate bad sound and low quality audios. This simply messes up the viewer's experience while watching. If you're shooting weddings and there are clips you're going to slow down, go ahead and shoot 60 frames per second. But if you're shooting narratives and interviews, I advise you 100% to stick to 24 frames per second unless you're shooting B-roll or supplementary footage to support the story. That's when you shoot it at 60 frames per second. When shooting music videos, it's always good to shoot at 24 frames per second for performances, to make audio syncing easy, and also to get that cinematic look in your films. And 60 frames per second for B-roll clips so that you can slow it down and make it look so beautiful. If you're in sports scenes like football, soccer, basketball, or even fighting movie scenes which involves action movements, it's always advisable to shoot at 60 frames per second so that your shutter is at 125 to make your footage more sharper and capture more movement so that motion blur is not visible. A lot of news, reality TV shows and movies are often captured at 30 frames per second to give it that cinematic look, and in case they want to slow it down, they are able to, slow the footage down. Pro tip: you cannot slow down a 24 frames per second clip because it will look so choppy, because there will be less information or data or image per frame rate, making it look so choppy and pretty amateur. Instead, you can slow down a 60 frame per second clip with no problem because it has more data, it has more information, making the final footage more smooth and seamless. Thanks guys for watching. If this video added value to you, please consider subscribing to my channel. Click on the notification bell below to stay updated whenever I upload a new video. Like this video, share it with your friends, and this next video will help you learn Premiere Pro Basics from beginner to pro. Click on it to learn more. Thank you so much. See you in the next video. Peace.